Hello everyone, and welcome to Mitacs' first webinar in our quantum series. My name is Reza, and it's my honor to be hosting you all today. We have outstanding speakers to tell us about their, entrepreneurial journey and enlighten us about different aspects of entrepreneurship in quantum technologies, these disruptive technologies that we hear about them all the time these days. They have potential to revolutionize how we are, doing information processing or information communication on both science and technology side. So that's why we want to encourage you to consider quantum entrepreneurship as your career path and help you, plan ahead. Before we begin today, I have a few housekeeping notes. Our meeting today is being recorded and will be available after this session for viewing later for those who cannot join us today. And we have two parts. First session, our distinguished speakers will tell you more about their ventures, their experience, and what they do in quantum domain. And in next part, we will have a panel discussion with all the speakers on the panel. We will have a 5 minutes break and also a 10 minutes Q&A session. At the end, please add your questions in the chat box. We will get to them. And if we don't have enough time today, I promise we will get back to them later. So yeah, that's about the questions. And now, without any further ado, I present to you Mitacs CEO and President, Dr. John Hepburn. John, please take it away.
Well, thanks very much, Reza. And he's already introduced me as the CEO of Mitacs. It's a role that I've had since just a few weeks before the pandemic. So I'll start by thanking everyone who's joining us. And I notice the count keeps on increasing down at the bottom of my screen. So thank you all for joining us and welcome to this webinar, Quantum Entrepreneurship-Crossing the Chasm. And I notice we're calling it a chasm and not a valley of death, which is kind of nice. I'm going to keep my remarks brief. We've got a great lineup of speakers, as you can see. And I know that you're all as anxious as I am to hear from them. And I'll start also by thanking all of our speakers who are generously giving us their time to share their expertise and experience. This is the first of what we plan to be a series on quantum technology, and I'd like to start by thanking Reza, who led us off. He's been the driving force behind this webinar and future webinars in this series. So thank you, Reza, for all the work you've done. My own background, I mean, I'm very non-entrepreneurial. My background is a professor of chemistry and physics for many, many years. I'm on sort of dormant, long-term, infinitely long-term leave as a professor of chemistry and physics at University of British Columbia. And my background is chemical physics, so I'm a firm believer in the power of quantum. That's what I studied for many years back in the old days when I actually was a functioning lab scientist. And I think that, our speakers today are going to talk about entrepreneurship in quantum, and I don't think they need to be convinced of the power of quantum technology. But I would say that, and hopefully nobody will disagree with me, we've got a long ways to go in terms of establishing, call it what you will, a quantum industry. So today's discussion is very timely. And that's not just in Canada, but it's around the world. There's the beginnings of a quantum industry, but we don't really have a quantum industry yet. So I know from my own research background and also before I joined Mitacs in my desire to escape professorial responsibilities, I worked at CFAR, the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, which has had for decades programs in quantum science, one in quantum materials, one in quantum information science. Some of you will be familiar with this work, and if not, interesting for you to look into. It's blue skies, not necessarily very entrepreneurial, but very powerful international academic networks. And so I know from my own experience at CFAR, at UBC, at elsewhere, that we have no issue with academic talent and research strength, both in Canada and internationally. The challenge is how do we drive this academic excellence into societal impact, into entrepreneurship, into creating a quantum industry. And so that's the topic of discussion today. What do we need to worry about when we're trying to establish entrepreneurial activities, establish companies based on quantum technology? And so that's what the topic of discussion is today. Mitacs, for those of you who don't know us, we're a national not-for-profit, a very large national not-for-profit, generously funded by governments, both federal and provincial, and by industry. And our job is to handle really the talent part of the challenge in entrepreneurship and in creating societal benefit from great academic research. So we do this through creating and supporting industry academic partnerships, and those partnerships are driven by student and postdoctoral internships. And so we've been doing this for a long time, 2 decades at Mitacs. We've doubled in size about every 3 years, and we continue on that path of growing strongly, thanks to government industry support. And this year, we expect to support about 20,000 internships. So that gives you an idea of our scope. We also know, although we haven't yet rolled it out, that we're going to be the talent component of the national quantum strategy here in Canada. And so we know we're going to be generously supported by the federal government, by provincial governments, and by industry. And what that will mean is over the next half dozen years, we'll be providing about $100 million of support for the talent component, for the internships component of the national quantum strategy, which, of course, is a much bigger strategy with much more funding being driven by our industry, science, and economic development ministry. But right now, we're going to hear from folks who are really at the coalface of trying to build quantum enterprises. And what we need to do, what barriers we need to break down if Canada's take advantage of the really spectacular research talent that exists at our universities. So I think that one key component that we can help with at Mitacs and why we're so interested in this panel discussion is we're all about talent training, partnerships, and talent recruitment, talent retention. And so that's how we can contribute to this conversation, but that's only part of the conversation. We're going to hear about the total picture in the presentations and the discussion today. If you're interested in what Mitacs can do, and here's a plug. I mean, I am the CEO, so I have to plug my own organization. We have 120 business development professionals spread across this country who are here to help create industry academic partnerships, here to help solve the problems that we need to solve to create really a vibrant quantum industry, and all sorts of industries, but we're talking about quantum today. And I would put Reza on the spot and say, if you want to get in touch with Reza. He's our account manager quantum, so he's taking the lead, but he's one of many people who can help out. And as I say, we're coast to coast, and so we're happy to help. We're busy, and Reza's part of the busyness. We're busy forming partnerships beyond our existing partnerships. We've been working with companies like OneQubit, D-Wave, and others, Xanadu, for many, many years now. But now we're upping our game. We're working on partnerships with organizations like I'll use the Zone d'Innovation in Quebec. Sherbrooke has a very powerful quantum center, and of course we have many powerful quantum centers, but I see Chloe's on the line, so I have to give a shout out to Sherbrooke because otherwise she'd be annoyed with me. We're working with incubators, Creative Destruction Lab, and others. And of course, the quantum institutes and the quantum centers of excellence that exist across this country. And of course, all of this is aimed at promoting entrepreneurship, promoting economic growth, and a viable and strong quantum industry. Something you may not be as familiar with is we have extensive international programs. And so I have the harsh task of going off to Paris, leaving on Saturday, and I'll be discussing many, many things because we have strong partnerships with France. But I'll be meeting with an old friend of mine, Antoine Petit, who's the president of CNRS, and also the national quantum lead, Neil Abrug. And we're discussing Mitacs' potential role in the Canada-France, the potential I should say, Canada-France cooperation on quantum. I know that Antoine, from my last discussion with him, wants to build a Canada-France network to support quantum entrepreneurship and research. And of course, this in part arises from a very successful quantum roundtable that we organized with France last year. So with that, Reza, I'm going to, we need to hear from the real experts. I'm a pretend expert. We need to hear from the real experts on this. So I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And you're absolutely right. We are here to help. We love to help having a vibrant quantum ecosystem from coast to coast to coast. Thank you. And our next speaker, I'm delighted to invite Dr. Elham Kashefi. Elham is a professor of computer science and personal chair in quantum computing at the School of Informatics at the University of Edinburgh and also at CNRS in France at Sorbonne University. She's the co-founder and CSO of VeriQloud. Elham, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Reza, for the invitation, and thanks a lot, John, for coming to France. So I shall welcome you on Saturday. Let me know. We can have a drink. I'm very glad to kick off. I've been told that I should introduce myself, say what I have been doing in my life, and how did I end up to do a company in 10 minutes. So I give it a shot. Let's see how far I can go. So I have one of those examples that, is a classic mathematician starting and becoming academic, then getting hands dirty and trying to do something serious and impactful. Let's see how that journey goes. So indeed, I'm a director of research at CNRS at Leipzig University, leading a large team. Leipzig is one of the largest CNRS lab as well as a computer science department. I've been also in the superposition, because in quantum you can, at University of Edinburgh. And in both ecosystem, I've been part of the application development. And there is the Quantum Computing Hub in UK, as part of national program in UK that started a decade ago. I'm the senior science team leader for the application development, and the same thing in the EU flagship. The involvement of CNRS was in the Quantum Internet Alliance, so I have been on the executive team. And all this ecosystem of talking with the academic and talking with the industry is just naturally pushed me very excitingly to the formation of VeriQloud, which I'm the co-founder, and I will talk about it later. But just to tell you a little bit, I don't know if you see now my next slide to make sure that I'm moving, okay? So my expertise, as I say, I really started as a mathematician back in Iran, and then turned to get excited about quantum when qubit were something on the blackboard. And over the decade, I move more and more towards developing application. And I guess, for the discussion and the topic to say, so if I want to somehow say, what was my specialty that moved me through this thing, I kind of have this entrepreneurship, the idea that how could we make use of all this thing that we're doing? So this has been always a burning question. And the way that it helped me a lot, everybody has their own journey, but I become a computer scientist among physicists. That would help me a lot to work directly with this physical substrate, so to remain as close as possible to understand what are the Lego pieces that people have been building over the last 20 years, and how could I really try to work on with that. So for me, the biggest advantage that I had is from very early on, this disciplinary culture of somebody's physicist, somebody's engineer, somebody's computer scientist, somebody's mathematician had to disappear. So that has been always the way I had led my own science, and I had this wonderful, this is another aspect of our field, that I met people from around the world in different aspects, junior, senior, etc., really working on so many different topics, quantum experiment, theoretical physics, computer science, cryptography, engineering, and all of this exposure. And really thanks to my own team and all of my collaborators and all of these different things that is started to shaping. So it was initially just science and paper production, then it started becoming consortium and building a big consortium, and then it started doing advisory board, and all of these things led to this sort of thinking of moving with the field. So just saying again how I've been working. So I've been part of, we need to do all of these tick boxes. We have been building ecosystem in both in UK and France as part of the national quantum plan. As John mentioned, Neil Brooke is now the leader of the national program. Uh, I've been writing the Quantum Software Manifesto of Europe that is defining essentially the vision of where the application effort should go. I have had my own team of 20 students between Edinburgh and Paris, and as I would advertise, and if you guys want to get a Mitacs project, come to Paris, let me know. I would be very happy to welcome you either in the company or in the university or at any of the location. The type of use case, that's the most interesting part perhaps, that like I start seeing how things we are developing could be actually become relevant. So already in my research, I was very keen to understand what's the pain point that industry are talking about in cryptography, in cybersecurity, in authentication, in machine learning, in privacy preserving. And I sort of try to do it backward to say, okay, what should be the mathematical question that we can answer to be relevant to this potential pain point that I keep hearing it from part of it. And as I said, I've co-founded VeriQloud, which I'm talking about it, being part of Airbus Quantum Challenge, and they have done this sort of community building. One of the things I'd like to highlight, the Quantum Protocol Zoo, that I try to bring very much different people from different walk of life to try to understand the common language and try to see which one of them do we need to push towards the standardization. So these are my claim to fame, working with various sort of highlight, quantum cloud, programming language, identification, security. And I just like to say that, like, again, even in here, I don't think it's, at least in my view, to focus on being special in one topic. When you're after application, you should be completely open-minded. You should just go for it. Is it machine learning? Is it programming? Is it quantum cloud? How do I can contribute in terms of trying to turn the wheel and the knowledge flowing the knowledge? That's what I want to say. So my personal ambition lately has been that quantum is really relevant. That's exactly the reason why I was so pleased to be invited to this panel, that because I really believe now is the time. Quantum is relevant. In my way of thinking is that we need to do open science. We need to be really not making this sort of separation of non-for-profit, for-profit, artificial boundary. This is probably one of the advantages of Canada and North American culture, that there is a very nice connection between these two boards. You don't need to worry, and essentially not to fall on no disciplinary silo. So with that sort of thinking, we founded VeriQloud. And I have been so lucky to have two of the best co-founders in the world, Mark Kaplan, which is the CEO of VeriQloud, and Josh Nunn, the other co-founder, experimentalist. So already in the company, you can see that we also diversify. We have people from cryptography, from protocol, from software development, from hardware, and trying to build that common language, because you cannot say that somebody build the hardware and we do application. We really tried to bring all of us together and keep talking and understanding each other language. What is FPGA programming? What is the photon? What is the cybersecurity? What is, fully homomorphic encryption? And that sort of common conversation has been the key to our team. So let me tell you a little bit quickly, I don't know how many minutes is left, to talking about VeriQloud, which is aiming to bring quantum cybersecurity to the quantum internet. That's the mission. So everybody hopefully agreed that data and computing are the new commodity. And the most important thing to do with this new commodity is how to secure it. And the whole point of the pitch and my science over the last decade was that to prove, really mathematical rigorously, that quantum communication are the only way that you can achieve the long-term security and privacy. We are talking about 100-year security. You want to have data of 150-year security. And of course, the pitch for VeriQloud is that we are the only one to have secure, scalable solution. So in our vision, in our pitch, we're looking at both secure communication, but we don't stop there. We go to security of classical cloud and all the way to security of the quantum cloud, which is my own invention. And in each of these domains, when you think about entrepreneurship, when you talk about industry, you need to always answer the lovely question of scalability. Just solving the problem in the base is not enough. You need to know how to scale it. You're really taking it to your customer. So quantum network exists all over the world. I should have put Canada already in here. There is a lot of this network and infrastructure being developed, all of these things. And the reason is that this is the only way to obtain long-term security. And also the best pain point is that how do we protect ourselves against data harvesting? Scaling is expensive and insecure. That's the years of us talking to customer to understand what's happening with the model and where can we bring an advantage, not just advantage scientifically, advantage from the customer point of view. And exactly that's what we're trying to do. So everybody's familiar with QKD, is a point-to-point solution, is a scaling it up is not easy, is bringing the vulnerability. So that's what we attack. So in VeriQloud, we have this unique solution that is full stack network solution, is scalable and is secure, does not require a trusted node, but as a result is focusing to the local metropolitan area. And a little bit like a scientific thinking, I'm trying to say that being entrepreneurial and scientists are not that different. So he said, okay, I'm focusing on local metropolitan. What can I do with that? Well, what you can do is exactly looking at the data, because data center are the local network that you want to target. And who wants really long-term data privacy? Well, healthcare, they want to have making sure the data is secure for as long as possible. Financial asset in Bitcoin, top secret governmental. So when you look at this huge market and amount of data bridge that exists, you will start seeing that people start realizing we have this particular issue of privacy. And one of the product of VeriQloud is exactly addressing between the hybrid, classical, and quantum, putting our Q line, which is a network solution with no vulnerability for the particular data center, and put the classical on top of that. So we can hopefully talk about it, but I cannot stop without telling you about this cloud, because this is a research that I did with my wonderful Canadian professor collaborator Anne Broadman from Ottawa, that we solved this problem 20 years ago classically, scientifically, that how do we provide security of quantum cloud computing? How do I run my computation on Amazon, making sure that Amazon doesn't learn my algorithm and data and hence get all the benefit? So we solved it 20 years ago, and fast forward, we have been trying to actually implementing. So VeriQloud is actually bringing this thing to the market and really solving the problem of transition of the research to quantum. I see Johnson sign is coming, assuming my time is up. So that's where we are. I just jump over to the quantum utopia that I really wish, and our dream is to bring this secure quantum data center, trying to build this Q line. We started with Berlin. We already have a network there. We are in Paris. We have another network. We are now trying to connect them with OVH, with the other startup, and eventually connecting, I should have put Xanadu here because they have photonic is very nicely links to us, trying to put all of this photonic quantum computation linked to here. So we're really having this ultimate security. I'll stop here, and thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Elham. Thank you for this great presentation. I'm sure lots of audience, they do have questions. They can either connect with you directly or add their questions here. We are happy to respond. Thank you very much. And our next speaker, we go from Paris. If I heard it right? Elham, you're in Paris right now? We go all the way to Alberta, thanks to the power of Zoom. Our next speaker is Dr. John Davis. He's a professor of physics at the Department of Physics, University of Alberta, co-founder and CTO at 0 Point Cryogenics. Please, John.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm actually here in our facility. And so if you hear a bunch of noise in the background, I apologize. We're actually working so that, so my name's John Davis. I'm in University of Alberta. I didn't prepare any slides. I just thought I would kind of ramble for a little bit about how I got to this spot. So I'm actually originally American, and I grew up in the States, and I moved to Alberta in 2008 and became a faculty member in 2010. And this is where I sort of, my background is in ultra low temperature physics. So really, thermodynamics and quantum physics at extreme low temperatures. And really, this is a very fundamental physics, right? This is, about as far from entrepreneurship as you can get. But as we, went along, I realized, as I had graduate students, and as my graduate students would graduate, or, my postdocs would graduate, you realize eventually that your students aren't going off into academia, but they're going off into industry jobs, right? And to me, this started to, I kind of dwell with this, and I started wondering, like, okay, even though our graduate careers, our graduate programs are designed to train academics those students are going off into industry. And so this is clearly a mismatch and a problem. And I started thinking about what we could do to serve those students that go off into industry better. So in, I don't remember what year, 2018, I think 2017, 2018, I became the director of a brand new Quanta is what we call it, CREATE program, an insert CREATE program designed to improve graduate training. And really with that question in mind, what can we do better to serve students going into industry? And really, I don't think we have answers. I think we still have that question. It's still, we're kind of continuously asking ourselves, what can we do to improve graduate education? Okay, so this is kind of my motivation. And then one of the things that we did to develop that is I developed a course that I call Physics, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. And in this Physics, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship class, it's like a totally non-traditional physics course that we've developed. And it's really kind of mashing up a physics world and a business course at the same time. And what we do is we read business books and Harvard Business Review articles and things like this, but we sit around and we discuss them as physicists. And this is a very simple premise, but what it actually does is it makes you realize eventually that the problem isn't the disconnect between industry and the business world and physics and academia is mostly language. It's mostly jargon. But if you have time to sit and discuss these concepts in these business books with a bunch of physicists, we actually realize that we can translate these concepts back and forth between these two different languages. And so we really learn that actually, so I'll give you an example. There's this really well-known business book that we read in my class called The Lean Startup. And this is, super well-known. And when you actually digest it as a physicist, you realize that all it really is the scientific method. It's the scientific method applied to business. That is, you form they call it an MVP, minimum viable product. Well, this is just your experiment, right? You build an experiment, you do a test, you get the data back, you revise your experiment, you do it again. Like this is the whole concept of the lean startup, and it's just the scientific method. And you kind of realize, okay, this chasm, between academia and business is false. It's not there. It's really just a language problem. Okay. So this is one of my big things that I really like to harp on, and that it's really, you just need to take that time and spend that time to learn the language, and that's it. That's really the only chasm. Since that's today's thing, is the chasm, right? So to me, that's the chasm, it's the language. So just to follow that kind of journey to where I am now. So I had a couple of students who, so in this course, we start from pitches, and we develop, by the end of the course, actually each student has developed a business plan for an idea. Okay. So they really come out of it with a real business plan. And I've had a couple of students throughout the years actually try to turn these into real companies. And this is sort of one of my main drivers for entrepreneurship, is really this idea of, again, in academia, you're nurturing your graduate students. Another way we can nurture our graduate students is help them, if they want to be entrepreneurs, do it, right? And so I had a couple of students who decided to form a company that was called Resolved Instruments, and we made some digital photodetectors for academic labs. And so this really started my sort of entrepreneurship journey. Instead of just talking about it, but actually doing it, I was helping these students form this company, kicking in money. We were just learning this stuff. And really, again, it's just like an academic project. It is something that you have to learn as you go, right? You set off in some direction, but you kind of know where you want to get to, but you have no idea how to get there. And you just figure it out as you go along. It's like a research project. Setting up a company is like a research project. And exactly the same level of fun in that way. It's just it's an unknown that you get to explore. And that's what we like to do as scientists, right? That company was moderately successful. It's still around. It's just a little bit inactive. It was a little bit too small. But what kind of got this idea in my head that this entrepreneurship could be kind of fun, right? And so what happened then was we had Alberta is pretty special in Canada and in the world. Maybe besides Quebec, and Quebec and Texas in North America. Alberta, Quebec, and Texas are the only three that I know that really have good, strong provincial science funding. And so I've been lucky to have pretty significant federal and provincial funding over the years as an academic. But when you get provincial science funding, even if it's for basic science, they kind of ask you, okay, how can you turn this into jobs and help the economy? And so I took that question seriously. I think a lot of people, when they get these grants, don't take that seriously, but I took it seriously. So I started really thinking about what could I do? And one of the points I want to make here is that, our research is really basic, really fundamental. And so I knew I couldn't commercialize any of our research. I think it's just really too fundamental. But instead, we can commercialize the tools that we use in the lab. And that's what we've done. So as low temperature physicists, what we do, I've been running and building dilution refrigerators for 20 years. And so what we decided to do is start a dilution refrigerator company. So just as a background, dilution refrigerators are the method for continuous cooling below 1 Kelvin and can reach sort of on the scale of 10 millikelvin. And these really form the basis of pretty much the hardware platform for almost every quantum technology. So if you do a Google image search for quantum computer, you don't see quantum computers, you see dilution refrigerators, right? And so the dilution refrigerator really is the face of a quantum computer. It's that hardware platform. And so we thought, what, we're experts in this. There's only a couple companies in the world that are making these things. People, Canada alone is injecting $1 billion into quantum technology, right? So let's say half that goes to software, half of it goes to hardware. Well, what are the hardware people doing with it? Well, they're buying fridges, right? So why are we taking our Canadian quantum money and shipping it off to Finland, right? Or England, right? This is crazy to me. So we said, this isn't far quantum technology. This is quantum technology today. And so we got this provincial grant to build our prototype, which was really this made this happen, right? So that's one part of the chasm is, getting that first, $1 million to build a prototype. Then we took this and worked on it from 2018 to 2001. In 2001, we said, what, this is really working. This is good. And so we really moved it out of the university lab and into the company. So here I am in our 5,000 square foot facility where we're, off campus. We're in the southern part of Edmonton in an industrial business park. And we have, our PhDs, but also our technicians, our machinists. We build all of our components ourselves. We assemble it ourselves, and we're really making dilution refrigerators, which we want to be, really the dilution refrigerator, the platform from quantum technology in North America for sure, and the world if we can, right? So just like in some ways, I would say Finland is batting above its weight in quantum because of this dilution refrigerator company in Finland. We would really like to kind of put quantum on the map today in Canada by really being that provider of a quantum hardware platform that you can just go out and purchase today. So that's what we're doing. That's 0 point cryogenics. 0 point, obviously, from the 0 point energy, 0 point motion, which is actually what keeps the liquid helium from freezing and solidifying inside a dilution refrigerator. So it's a nerdy science name, but we love it. So anyway, that's me. Oh yeah, and by the way, the other thing that I would recommend is, I'm the CTO, but we have a real CEO. He's an actual business person, and that's made a huge difference in the company. So I was able to build we were able to build the product in the lab, but last year I brought on this CTO. He kicked a whole bunch of his own money in. So he's an angel investor and the CEO. And really that accelerated us to the point where we have a 5,000 square foot facility and 10 employees, and we're building equipment and taking contracts. So we've really accelerated that and moved past the chasm. I have no idea how long I've been talking for. Give a physicist, give a professor the ability to rant for a while. We can just talk forever. You know, I do it for 90 minutes in front of a class. Anyway, I'll stop there. And thank you very much, Reza, for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you very much for the great story and sharing it with us. Now we go from Alberta all the way to Quebec. And Chloé, our next speaker. She's here with us. She's Business Development Director for Sherbrooke Quantum Innovation Zone and the startup incubator ACET, and soon to be launched quantum VC fund Quantacet. She will tell us about all of those. Please.
Thank you, Reza, and hello, everyone. So as you've heard, I wear many hats. Let me try to make that a bit more understandable for you guys. So the first one that was mentioned, I think, is ACET, which is a deep tech incubator here in Sherbrooke. So your regular incubator that tries to help startups, which has also a focus on quantum, since we're currently incubating, I think, 6 or 7, actually, we had a new one recently, 7 quantum companies. My second role is that I am currently raising a venture capital fund for helping very early on startup companies, specifically in quantum. So this is coming up. You'll hear more about it maybe in a few months. But the last role I'll focus on today is that I'm working for the Sherbrooke Quantum Innovation Zone. So if you haven't heard about that, that's something that was created early this year by the Quebec government. Quebec government is creating these zones with a specific theme so that we can grow industries in different cities around the province. And so the one in Sherbrooke is specialized on quantum. The idea is to take quantum technologies from research all the way to commercial applications. So what we really want to do is to build a true quantum industry here around Sherbrooke in Quebec. So you guys might wonder how I ended up in this seat. So my background, I was trained in engineering physics about 10 years ago. I graduated 10 years ago. In graduate studies, I specialized in computational chemistry, solid state physics, things like that. So if some of you are graduate students, I was once in your shoes trying to figure out what I would do with my life. And one thing that graduate studies taught me is that research is not for me. So some people enjoy doing that, but it was pretty clear for me that I didn't want to become an academic, even though sometimes, or at least at the time, I don't know if things have changed, but at the time, in many places, there was some kind of pressure sometimes to go for a research career, especially if, I was told actually that I was pretty good at research, and so there was some pressure to keep on this route, but I just knew I needed to move on to something else. So I switched to industry. And at that time, there was just no quantum industry, really. So I had a few different jobs. One of them was that I worked for a technology transfer office. So again, if some of you are in a position that you're developing a technology in a university and thinking of moving that to a startup, I've seen this pattern many, many times. So I understand the challenges of taking a technology from a lab to a company. And another job that I had is that I worked for a quantum computer startup for 3 years. So I got my hands dirty at it, designing qubits and using it like running a dilution refrigerator, as John mentioned. And this is what brought me actually to this new position now. I see my role as supporting the startup ecosystem, supporting quantum entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs really grow to the next step. So that's the role of the zone. Essentially, the zone is here to put structures in place so that entrepreneurs can build this quantum industry that we're talking about, from the very early stages of creating a startup all the way to having a successful SME and hopefully moving on to a much larger company. So I can give you a few examples of what we're working on. One project is that we're renovating an old building into, we want to make it a very modern and a nice place to work in. And that's going to be what we hope the headquarter of quantum companies in Sherbrooke. So a place where people can have office space, but also lab space. And that's one also very important aspect of that project, is that we're creating an industrial quantum lab. So with this similar kind of equipment that you would get usually in a university, very specialized, very expensive equipment, dilution refrigerators, electronics, wet benches, machine shops, things like that. But this equipment is dedicated to the quantum companies in the ecosystem. So instead of a startup having to go and raise millions of dollars to buy its first dilution refrigerator to get its, say, to build a quantum computer or do something else, then our companies here will be able to rent the equipment on a daily basis or weekly basis to get on with their projects. We also have projects to support very, very early companies, what we call a venture studio. So it's a structure to accompany people at the very early stage of just saying that they want to become an entrepreneur. Maybe they don't know how to do it. They might have a project, they might not have a project, they might have a co-founder, they might not have a co-founder. So we would be there to help them through these stages. And after, when you get to a more structured company, then I mentioned the deep tech incubator ACET is there to take the ball and do the next steps with you. And one last project, let me mention just the last one, and then I'll leave it to the other speakers. When that last project is, we're setting up a quantum internet testbed with a partner in Quebec here named Numana. So we have access to dark fiber, and we're creating the network, and we're gonna set up a space, a lab space for people to come and essentially connect with the nodes. The idea is to make this available to technologists, engineers, startups, for them to develop on top of the network. So either build software or hardware solution, develop applications, and turn that into real tangible things. So that's my story. To you, Reza.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chloé. I'm sure lots of students have many questions for you, and they can either reach out to Chloé directly, ask about Innovation Zone and other projects you mentioned, or I'm happy to help with that. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Estelle Inag. She's a research scientist at Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, co-founder and CTO of very interesting company. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Is ENIAC? Am I right, Estelle?
ENIAC. All right, thank you very much for the invitation, Reza, and Mitacs. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I think I have 5 minutes to do so. So I'm Estelle. As Reza mentioned, I was born and raised in Cameroon. I did my BSc and my MSc there in physics, basically. And then I moved to Italy, where I did a PhD in statistical physics. So at the beginning of my PhD, actually, I was very much interested in Bose-Einstein condensation. And I wanted to work at the time on Bose-Einstein condensation. But then my supervisor at the time, Sebastiano Pilariti, he told me that there is actually a more cooler, sorry for all the guys doing dilution refrigerator. He was telling me that there was a more cooler topic, which is basically quantum computing, but from the simulation side, not really from the hardware side. And that was closer to his expertise. That is, how can we mimic the behavior of quantum computers with basically classical algorithm, quantum Monte Carlo algorithms. So my PhD was based on developing quantum-inspired algorithms based on quantum Monte Carlo to solve optimization problems. So after my PhD, I moved to Canada at the Perimeter Institute, and I had a couple of offers, but I chose Perimeter because of the lab that was really at the blending of the startup interactions and academia, right? And that was rare at the time to find this kind of ecosystem. And also because the PI, Roger Melko, is also, he was one of the first person to actually use machine learning techniques to probe the behavior of quantum matter and quantum computers. So by doing that, I was kind of increasing my toolbox in learning machine learning tools. So I came here and being at the Pickle, which is a quantum intelligence lab of Perimeter, I got a postdoc affiliation at the Vector Institute, and I started also collaborating with people at the Vector Institute. From there, we developed an algorithm that we call Bayesian annealing, which basically is using physics-inspired methods together with state-of-art recurrent neural networks to basically solve hard optimization problems. And based on that algorithm, we started having discussions with people at the Vector Institute, and they told us that, I mean, if you guys want, maybe you can file a patent. And if you file a patent, you are responsible for commercializing it. And then I saw an opportunity to basically, take my research from the lab to the market. And Vector helped me basically to put me in touch with a couple of incubators in Toronto. I went to Creative Destruction Lab, and I want to put on the spot Jake here, who was a venture manager at CDL. And I met my co-founder, Benan Javan-Paras, who also has a PhD in theoretical physics, been working in bank for a while. Because the issue that I had at the time is that I had a hammer, so I had a method that we filed a patent, but I didn't know where to apply it. And Benham had expertise in finance and more specifically in the capital markets. And he saw their pain point in derivative pricing that was basically taking time to price, and that people were using Monte Carlo or still using Monte Carlo methods. And he thought that using quantum methods or quantum inspired method with AI, we could basically speed up derivative pricing. And this is how the company Yannick was built. So Yannick comes from my local language, which means the intelligence for tomorrow, and the Q is for quantum. So it's kind of quantum intelligence for tomorrow. And what we do is that we build computational software for banks and insurance companies that need fast and accurate derivative pricing. And the idea is to have production-ready algorithms that are independent of the hardware setup. So right now, the strength of Yannick comes from basically the expertise of our team and the focus on basically quantum intelligence. A lot of time when we talk to, especially to investors, they are like, are you a quantum company? Are you an AI company? I mean, we are both, we're in the superposition of state as we are here. We are both kind of leveraging both quantum and AI technology to speed up derivative pricing. And yeah, so I think I will stop there and not take much time, and I'll be happy to answer any more questions that people have.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Estelle, for sharing your story with us. This is great. After Estelle, we have Jake as our next speaker. Jake is a quantum stream lead and senior venture manager at the Creative Destruction Lab that we just talked about, Rothman School of Business in Toronto. Please take it away, Jake.
Great, thanks. And I just want to check if you can see my screen here.
Yes, we can.
Beautiful. All right. Well, great to see some familiar faces here. And yeah, and I'd just like to kind of talk a little bit about the Creative Destruction Lab, which might be a great opportunity for many of the postdocs and researchers in the room. So just kind of rewinding back kind of a bit more on the purpose of what Creative Destruction Lab really is about, it was about answering this kind of key question of why is it so much harder to build startups outside of places like Silicon Valley? Right. And if you had a map of the world and kind of plotted out where capital has been invested in these kind of deep tech and science-based startups, there'd be a mountain over Silicon Valley. So our hypothesis was it was not a lack of capital nor ideas and effort that was preventing other hubs in the world from getting this level of emergence, but it was really this lack of kind of key business judgments, which would come from people who have been there and done it before, who are connected to those who have kind of gone through the process of bringing their idea outside of academia and bringing it into something more commercial. So really what the CDL is it's a program for early stage science and technology based founders, researchers, those trying to spin their technologies out of the lab. And really it's done through this objective setting mentorship process. This is done through various mentors, scientists, entrepreneurs, and investors who have been there kind of peer-reviewed way so that you can kind of choose out where to focus out of the 1,000 places that you can as a founder. So ultimately, it's done over this mentorship portion of the program. It's a 9-month portion where we basically have these 5 very intensive session days. And various stakeholders are in the room, people who are kind of more on the scientist or economic type, our fellows and associates who are more on the investment and kind of entrepreneurial type. We've got our corporate and technology partners, as well as MBA students who actually sometimes even join the teams to support on various business efforts. The sessions themselves are kind of divided up a bit. So we've got the main smaller group discussions, which you kind of do kind of speed dating, almost matching with different mentors to kind of go through these challenges and opportunities, but also align on objectives. A large room discussion is where now you are not presenting to the room, but instead the mentors themselves present you to the room of why they think these are the key challenges, and actually debate amongst themselves and critique each other of where would be better to focus. I won't go through too much more on this side, because I do want to get to the quantum elements, but ultimately it's this peer-reviewed advice, organic opportunities for investment. We are non-for-profits. We're not taking a cut or any type of piece into your IP. And ultimately the mentors are over time focusing more on the companies in the program by dedicating additional time to the ones left. We've gone across over 11 different sites globally, and ultimately across various technology streams. And 20 billion has been kind of created through equity value creation there. And ultimately kind of bringing it more back to the quantum piece here. We've been around since 2017, so almost, for the last 6 years now. This was founded by Peter Witzak, who was a key researcher in the kind of quantum and machine learning intersection that was really kind of bridging a lot of the gaps here of the commercialization of quantum way back then. And since then, about 120 have come through, 120 million raised, and ultimately, out of all the companies associated with kind of the privatization of quantum technologies, about a fifth in the world have gone through CDL or been associated in some form. So we've developed the program to address like a number of barriers for that commercialization. One is that access to infrastructure, the industry experts, and limited exposure to quantum expertise. So we've partnered with key technical partners that provide hardware resources and training to the participants in the program. So this is kind of key and involves in our key quantum bootcamp, which runs 1 month before the mentorship phase. We connect and get training from kind of key industry experts that have been exposed to quantum, have the background, or are building commercialization in that space. And then we also have key training from kind of the quantum scientists that are very hard to get in touch with, or are very key to pushing the field forward. People like Roger Malco, Barry Sanders, Michele Mosca, to name a few. And ultimately, this is all built and integrated through the Quantum Bootcamp, which is this hybrid of technical and business training. A quantum hackathon ended off, so this is a prize, non-dilutive funding competition where they actually solve some of the technical partner challenges and get into teams. And really, it's a melting pot for researchers, engineers, and business domain experts to kind of form teams. In fact, about 10 teams were formed through the bootcamp last year, and 5 of those ended up becoming startups in our program out of the cohort of 20. So you can just see here what the in-person bootcamp kind of looks like. And just to close off here, we've got some notable ventures that have gone through our program, both in the, starting in our first year, kind of more in the software application space, everything from materials discovery to even areas of kind of complex manufacturing, optimization problems and things like this. We ended up going a bit more international in year 2, expanding the scope to a bit more, enterprise software, biotech, and cybersecurity. And in year 3, this is when we open the doors to hardware. So you can see companies like SP Quantum here, who's using NV Diamond Centers, and they're based out of Quebec. We've also had companies like Multiverse, which have really pushed the field forward in terms of how to use quantum and quantum-inspired methods for finance. And then in year 4, we had companies kind of more in the quantum hardware, companies like AQT building an ion trap system, Peter Zoller, and many more kind of key parts of the foundation of that technology. But I'll wrap up there. But this is a great way to, if you are a kind of a researcher looking to bring out your idea and turn it into reality, it's a great way to kind of expand your network and overcome some of the barriers on the commercialization. And that's really what we do here. So if you want to get in touch, let me know. You can reach out directly, reach out to this link coming up this summer. But yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Reza and Mitacs team.
Thank you very much, Jake. Thank you. Thank you and CDL for what you're doing for quantum ecosystem in Canada. I know at least 2 founders graduated from CDL right now on this call. And with that, okay, we need to raise if you want to have a startup. So let's bring on Mo Kermani. He's the managing partner at Vantage Capital with a focus on investment in these areas, of cloud computing, machine intelligence, analytics, cybersecurity, and of course, quantum. Mo is a physicist, graduated from UBC. Mo, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think my information will be probably a lot less interesting than the other folks who do with much more complicated stuff. So I'm a managing partner for Vantage Capital Partners. We are an early stage technology investment fund based out of Vancouver, Canada. We manage about $400 million of assets and invest across fundamentally 3 themes. Those themes have to do with the first one being analytics, so infrastructure, software that's used to visualize, analyze, and make sense of large volumes of data. The second area, which is relevant to quantum, is deep technology, which we call deep tech, that is kind of products and services that are based on a fundamental breakthrough in the field of science or engineering. And the third area is what's going on at the intersection of biology and computation. So my background is I was trained as a particle physicist back in the 90s, and then I left academia to join the startup ecosystem. I was part of 3 startups. The first 2 did not succeed, and the third company that I started back in right after the dot-com collapse, we built the world's first cloud storage system, which we ultimately sold, grew the company, and then ultimately sold it to the second largest data storage company in the world called NetApp, that's based in the Bay Area. Then I was a vice president for NetApp for a while, dealing with kind of our global cloud customers and how they would move the transition to cloud computing. And then I became a partner at Vantage in 2012 to look after our investments in more of the deep tech and enterprise space. So some of the investments I've been involved with. So for me, quantum sort of doesn't end with quantum computing. There's a lot of things in life that are quantum inspired, including the computer on my desk that I'm talking to you on. So for me, quantum spans a whole area from sensors to devices. Give you some of the investments that I've been involved in the quantum space specifically. I was the lead investor and spun out a company called Quantum Benchmark out of Waterloo and the Institute for Quantum Computing, which we built basically to profitability, actually, to provide software for all of the major groups, major companies that were building quantum computers in the world. That company basically came out of an idea of a group of scientists at IQC, when that company was sold eventually to Keysight, which is an instrumentation provider and does a lot of work in quantum computing. I led the last round of financing in a company called Raxium that was based in the Bay Area, that was building the world's first micro LED display, epitaxy technology to really try to create red, green, and blue LEDs on a single wafer in a compound semiconductor, never been done in the world. And that company was acquired by Google. And I'm also an investor in another deep tech company called Echodyne that's using metamaterials to build the world's first phased array radar. That company is based in Seattle, Washington. And that company just raised actually $135 million round that was led by Bill Gates. So we try to get involved in companies that are basically using science and technology to solve the fundamental problem that exists in the world, and that problem and the products and services are protected through some kind of barrier to entry. Happy to, there's just so many different things I could talk about in terms of lessons of going from the lab to commercialization to ultimately building a business. Happy to talk about any aspect, but I think there's just this, exciting time to be in quantum. I think deep tech startups have a unique attribute that requires a unique group of investors and a unique group of people to surround the companies. They're very different than traditional startups. And the quantum space is early. I agree with the statement that there's no quantum industry yet. It will take time to evolve. And it is going to require a combination of government assistance, external capital, as well as great entrepreneurs who have ideas and have the stick-to-itness that it takes to actually build a business for a deep tech startup, because it's very different than building a software business that can have revenues or profits within a very, very short period of time. And therefore the journey is for the entrepreneurs and the investors is different. And it's, folks need to be really mindful of what that journey looks like, because it is, especially as we enter a period of, we go from a period of capital abundance to a period of capital scarcity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maud. So many great lessons. I think, very important lesson is not to give up if the first 2 startups didn't work out very well. And yeah, we can talk about what is happening on the investment ecosystem. We hear about, the whole winter thing, but perhaps another time. Thank you very much for the great sharing this your experience with us. Next speaker on our list is Jackson Hamilton. Jackson is a technical director at BDC Capital Deep Tech Venture Fund. As you know, they do have funding for quantum for quantum technologies, quantum startups. Please, Jackson.
Thanks, Reza. Yeah, maybe I'll just start with a little bit of an overview of my background. I got the deep tech bug in the late 90s, where I went to Silicon Valley North with the idea of working in a startup. I went into the electrical engineering program at Carleton right in the late 90s and had big dreams. And then the bust happened right after that. And the jobs and the opportunities seemed to dry up at that point. So I was offered, based on my work on my undergrad, offered an opportunity to work with the RCMP within a systems engineering opportunity, and found that a really rewarding opportunity. Worked there for 15 years on secure networks, and built. By the end was leading half the networks across the country, but I got a little bored and with the technology, and kind of got the quantum bug. I met some inspirational people at the NRC, Dr. Ben Sussman and Dr. Duncan Stewart, and I kind of caught the quantum bug, and I moved to NRC to be part of their the quantum technologies program there. Had a great 5 or 6 years there. Got a chance to work with a lot of the leading, not only research leaders all across the country, in a team of creative and talented people at the NRC, 40-person research team, but also got a chance to work with some of the top startups across the country. I remember meeting Christian for the first time. We were early supporters and engagement with Xanadu. We supported some of the early startups out of Sherbrooke, Nord Quantique and SB Quantum, and worked quite a bit with some of the thought leaders at IQC as well, and did lots of work with Evolution Q, for example, out of IQC. So it was a really great opportunity to not only work with, I saw the research strength across the country, but I saw the opportunity space around. There's these budding startups that are trying to do something different and grow a quantum industry in Canada. And having seen what a potential industry, a world global industry was in Silicon Valley North in the late 90s and early 2000s, I guess I started, I believe in that dream, I guess, right? And so, as Duncan would say, after pushing the rope for many years at the NRC, I joined Duncan on the other side and grabbed the other side of the rope on the venture side, and was very happy to join the BDC Deep Tech Venture Fund just over a year ago. Not sure how many people are familiar with BDC, but BDC is the Bank of Canadian Entrepreneurs. It does small business loans all across the country, but it's also a little known fact that it's one of the largest, it is the largest VC investor in the country. Primarily, they fund fund-to-funds all across the country. However, they do create funds to specifically address market gap opportunities. Some of the previous funds that were created were the Industry to Innovation Fund, the Women in Technology Fund, and more recently, the Deep Tech Venture Fund, which was created to address the research to commercialization gap in the country. I think we can all agree that Canada has world-class research. However, on the IP side and the commercialization of that IP, traditionally we've lagged behind. And I think we see quantum as one of those opportunities to really potentially fix that problem. So we're very interested in, we're in deep tech. So when we look at deep tech, we look at quantum, we're looking at advanced photonics, advanced electronics, foundational AI, next generation materials, and cyber technologies. Those are kind of the guardrails that we look at based on the experience and competencies within our team. We don't do med tech and biotech just because of the regulatory environment and the different skill sets associated with that. But we do see a lot of opportunities around the quantum technologies, specifically in computing, communications, and sensing. And maybe in the panel, I can expand on some of those specific opportunities and how we're looking on that. But maybe just to, in my last couple minutes, just wanted to share a bit of a framework on how we kind of look at the opportunity space a little bit. So, we could try to make simple models on how we view the world, right? And so one of the ways that we look at it is maybe like a technology risk and a market risk opportunity. And so in traditional, more SaaS-oriented business, you probably have a lower technology risk and lower market risk. And there's lots of venture capital to address those startups across the country. Where you're starting to see higher technology risk and lower market risk, one example could be quantum computing, for example, right? So an extremely difficult problem to solve. Obviously a huge focus on the technology roadmap and the associated technology milestones associated with that. But when a fault-tolerant quantum computer is built, there will be a large and direct market associated with that opportunity. So that's one way that we kind of think about it. And then the other way we kind of say maybe lower technology risk and higher market risk. And so we would kind of frame that as maybe the quantum software opportunity, where in quantum software, you're maybe taking advantage of some classical methodologies to drive value with customers. Maybe you're working with the finance sector or the pharmaceutical sector and really getting to know their problem space and developing value and solutions for them. And then from a technology perspective, maybe you're looking at then dabbling in the quantum space, and as the hardware evolves, you're developing that quantum software capabilities that plugs into your existing client base. And then obviously the high tech risk and high market risk becomes a bit more difficult to get your head wrapped around, right? And have to put a little bit more emphasis on that. So Reza, maybe I'll stop there and give some time back, but thanks for the invite again, and just wanted to share some of the way our frameworks of how we're looking at things.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I really encourage our audience to look up BDC and their deep tech fund. It can be very, very useful for quantum startups. Thank you, Jackson. And I don't think we have time right now for the break. So I suggest we go just straight forward to our panel discussion and we start with the questions. And I hope you agree with me on that. And yeah, the first question is for Elham, industry, academia, or startups, which route to take? That's $1 million question for all the postdocs and grad students, right? How do I know if I got what it takes to become an entrepreneur? How did you make that decision, Elham?
It's easy. It's quantum. Do the superposition. Do them all. That's how I managed to do it. I was very lucky to be able to be in the right time, to be able to continue. Of course, there is several elements of it. I think, it's my sounds a bit cheesy, but really you need to follow the passion, because at the end of the day, we are in this journey, whether you want to be research, as Chloé was saying, at the end of the day, you're the only one who can define which adventure you want to go, if you have the opportunity to go through it. And I really want to insist that they are not that different. While maybe from outside world we look at different, or maybe the field has changed right now. There are a lot of fantastic research questions that comes out in the entrepreneurship. So if you used to think that, some of us purists who think that, I don't want to go to working in a company or set up a company, that's so applied and it's not about really finding the blue sky research. It's not true. The quantum is going through that path. So it's still a very interesting, day to day for my company. We still, scratching our head and trying to solve serious research question to go. And the other way around as well, is not like, if I leave research and go to academy, I can never, as I leave research and go to university, to company, I cannot come back. So there is a very, for the time being, at least on the application domain, I can say that, when it comes to the developing application, we are in the same place. So I don't know what if I understood with the mumble jumble, but I would say the only thing is that be passionate about. So that's what's for me. I never planned to be a scientist. I ended up accidentally. I never planned to become an entrepreneur. I never planned to become industrial. I'm pretty sure some other panelists might saying it. It's just the opportunity when it comes, and I felt that's right, and I'm excited. It's the journey I want to take, and you jump in it, and you see if it works. If it works, if not, you will learn something.
Great. Absolutely. We make it a lesson, right, to learn. And John, what is your take on that? You have done the same, same move from academia to industry, and you're in superposition as well right now.
Yeah. So right, rephrase the question. So ask the question again. It's what's it take?
Yes. What does it take to become an entrepreneur? If I'm a postdoc in physics department right now, how should they, know that I can be a great, startup founder as well?
Boy, that's a tough question. All these questions that you've asked are really tough. And I don't think they're good. I have to be honest. I don't think there are good answers to any of them. I think Elham said, you don't really know until you do it, right? I think, but I think, in my opinion, what does it take? A lot of time. I mean, it's a very busy job, and so you've got to really be committed. And I actually think that it's, in some ways, it's better to do it as a graduate student or a postdoc than right after that, because you're comfortable being poor. You can live on noodles. You don't. It's a great time in your life to take risks. That's what I mean to say. That's the better way to phrase it, right? And it's always a risk. And as you heard Mo say, he had 3 startups before he had the successful one. You actually hear that in the entrepreneurship world a lot. And I've always kind of wondered about it, why people brag about how many failed startups they have before they have a successful one. And now I realize why that is. And it's really like, if you imagine doing science and you say, oh, every experiment I do works. Well, no one would believe you, right? Experiments fail all the time, right? And businesses are like experiments. They fail. And you have to be willing to take that risk, to do the experiment and see where you get to. I think physicists are really naturally suited to this. And yeah, so like Elham said, give it a shot. That's my 2 cents.
Perfect. So taking the risk, being able to take a risk is an important part for sure. I don't know who else wants to add to those answers. Chloé, I see you unmuted yourself.
I would add something. I would say just be open-minded. Be ready to learn, open to learning new things. Don't be scared to ask for help, and talk to people, ask as many questions as you can from people who've done it before, and just try to learn from them and be open to other people's comments. That's really, for me, the most important thing about being an entrepreneur.
I can tell you, sort of based on my experience, having worked with dozens and dozens of entrepreneurs over my career, there's a reason why you shouldn't do it. And the reason why you shouldn't do it is because you want to make money in short order. And that is not, you may get lucky, and if you're at the right time, at the right place, and the confluence of forces come together, you might get lucky, but you have to have the dedication to want to change something profound in order to build a successful business. And I think it's really important to also understand the desire to build a successful business and surround yourself with people that are going to take the idea into a business. And sort of to come back to pedestrian things, business is about creating products and services that are necessary and deliver value to your customers and ultimately have the potential to become profitable. that otherwise they become research projects, which are funded by governments. So, and that road takes a long time, and perseverance is necessary. So if you're waking up every morning thinking, when am I going to buy my Ferrari by cashing out my startup, that's not good motivation.
Great. Thank you very much, Mo, for sharing that. I absolutely agree. There is a lot of pain and suffering involved, and usually, especially when it comes to quantum techs, you should not expect any, short-term money or Ferrari. Thank you. And let's move on to our next question, which is for John, and the question is entrepreneurs skill set toolbox. What are the most important skills a scientist must learn before jumping on the entrepreneurial roller coaster, John? Besides physics and quantum mechanics, what else do we need?
No, Reza, I saw the list of questions beforehand, and I have to tell you, I think this is really the hardest one. I'm calling unfair here. No, so what is it that they need? And actually, I've been thinking about this, and a lot of, if you talk to a lot of industry professionals, they'll say, oh, physicists are great because they have this analytical skills, right? They know problem solving. They've worked on a hard problem and they've spent the time to make it work. There are things that are natural about physicists, about scientists in this world. And then there are things that they say, oh, well, but they don't have soft skills like being able to present, their ideas in a really short order. And I believe that is one that's very strong, is communication. But I also think that if you take your graduate education seriously, that actually those things are there. I know my graduate students have to, present all the time. They have to write papers. They have to give posters. They have to, you really, if you're taking those roles very seriously, there are those learning opportunities for all those soft skills in academia that can make you a great entrepreneur. To be able to tell someone in 30 seconds, we have a local event every Thursday night here in Edmonton called Startup TNT. And it's just a bunch of entrepreneurs getting together for a drink and having conversations. And it's fantastic. But you got to be able to convince somebody that your business idea is interesting in 30 seconds over a beer, right? This is this elevator pitch. And, I think that that's really one of those skills that you should foster and you should develop in graduate school as a postdoc is your writing skills, your communication skills in general. I think if you can top up one thing, maybe it's that. But I'd like to hear what other people have to say about this as well.
Great.
I can jump. Yeah. I just want to add to the list something that it was definitely the case for my own journey, that you need to be really humble in a very particular way, that be ready to be facing things that you don't know, because just because you are the professor of computer science and you have seen it all, doesn't mean that you're seeing it. So I think, I thought being a scientist made me humble, but actually being an entrepreneur made me much more humble to see my own shortcoming, whether it's a skilling, whether next day I need to learn something about Amazon Cloud, or the other days I need to learning it, what else, how to do hiring. So I think this that part is actually very interesting and learning part, but is something that you need to be ready to face your shortcoming, and as Mo was saying, be dedicated to take it to the next step.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. There's so much that we don't know as a physicist when you go to the entrepreneurial world. The other skill I think is really important is storytelling. And I wish we worked more on that in physics department. I don't know. Estelle, what do you think?
Well, for me, it would be the ability to learn a lot of different things quickly, especially things that are not technical. I mean, understand the jargon when they start talking about, I don't know, LOI. I mean, it start talking about seed investing. What does it mean? And a lot of people in business will only talk jargon. So you really need to pick those things quickly. Learn the intellectual property space, all the law, the things that are related to law, learn all the things like related to AWS if you are like a SaaS company. I mean, learn to talk to investors. What are the things that they are interested in? learn to do maybe a business plan, a product development plan. So there are a lot of different things that are not really like physics. And time management is very important. Like, what are the things you need to focus on? Because the most important commodity that you have is your time, right? What to give your time and attention to when. That's very important to learn very quickly.
Hey, Estelle, following up on that, that's a really good point about learning the jargon, but I think it's actually relatively easy. I mean, I think that there's so many business books written, right? That like, you know, I can give you 3 and then you're good, right? If you read Blue Ocean Strategy, Lean Startup, and Venture Deals, you're good. You've got the whole thing. I don't think there's anything else. You're going to have all that jargon. And physicists can do that research and learn those. Like, you have to learn jargon all the time. Elham's talking about jargon in quantum communication, the words that I don't know, right? And I'm a quantum physicist. So business, quantum, there's always going to be jargon. So I think they can do that, right?
I totally agree. Like, I only read Venture Deals, for example, but how do you know Venture Deals is the book to read, or the Lean Startup? You need to be directed to the right.
Yeah. Somebody's got to tell you the right books to read, right? And that's part of this network that Jake was talking about, finding that network and making sure that you talk to people who know, right? And I think that network really is very important in that.
I agree.
Yeah, we can use that as strategy. Just respond to their jargons with physics jargons and quantum jargons, right? They don't
do that. Then you just get further and further apart. That's the wrong approach, Reza. You get further and further. You got to find the like, oh no, you're saying the same thing as me. Yes. Right? That's the goal.
Yes. Jackson.
Yeah, maybe I just add like the idea
Please.
that perfect is the enemy of good, right? The idea, and I think this is one of the things that you get at participating in CDL, for example, right, is the ability to get out there, talk to clients, get your hands dirty, get into the market and actually deal with problems. And I think by doing that, we talked about the illustrious, product market fit, but that idea is that, by doing that experimentation, it's similar to your, scientific background, but doing that in a business context, I think is a really good thing to do. And, I've seen CDL do it, and they're obviously very good at that.
Jackson, you just rang my bell, man. It's exactly that thing. All these ideas are just the scientific method. Everybody can all these scientists can do it. It's no problem. Just got to learn those words.
One of the things that I think it's really important to understand when you're building a business, as a leader of a business, the things you do fall into 2 categories, generally speaking. The things you do that you can only do, and the things you do that other people can do better than you. And the question is, as a founder, and a lot of founders, when they found companies, it's their baby. There's a huge emotional attachment to the company. And, I was involved in the early days of CDL as a mentor. And one of the things that CDL was created is to allow entrepreneurs to make right decisions based on input and make that judgment. And I think the idea, it is very, very important to understand that dynamic. And my recommendation would be, it's a lot easier to start a company with a co-founder that complements that aspect than to start the company alone. Because when it comes to critical decisions, which you will have to make as a founder and a CEO, it's always good to have a devil's advocate. Human decision-making is inherently biased, and there are a number of cognitive biases that impact our decisions. And it is super critical for those decisions to be made without bias. And I think that's one of the things that CDL helps, is helping people to formulate those decisions. So I think this is a lot more about what I would call the little things that you don't learn in school, more so than just normal everyday human interaction stuff. So I think physicists have all the capabilities to pick up all of the stuff around business. That's irrelevant to a large extent. You're not going to make or break your company because you don't know how to read a cap table. That's not going to make or break the company. You're going to make or break the company if you are focused on an area and the market's telling you that it's something completely different, but you're cognitively biased towards your own ideas and you keep going down that path.
I just want to second that, So I just want to second what Mama say that. So in two concepts, not just for the bias, but also a company is not a one-person show. It's really don't do that. I think science should not be like that. I personally against any. I mean, I never managed to succeed to discover anything just by myself. Is always that conversation actually bring that sort of thinking. But in the company, I mean, as I mentioned, is like having the right funders to challenge everything. Is like your business partner are probably is going to be the most important partner you would have, and I think that's very, very important. And I want to complain that people are just talking about physicists. They are not the only people who become co-founder and business developer. We have mathematician, computer scientists, engineers. So stop about you physicists claim the world.
Sorry, I just lumped them all in with physicists. Physicists and scientists is synonymous in my brain. Sorry, I apologize. But no, I 100% agree with that, Mo. That's exactly right. And this is why I'm CTO and I have a CEO, right? And I think that was one of the best decisions I made, was to bring someone on and even, immediately give up half the company to them, right? Because physicists, scientists, sorry, that, we really should be the CTOs and let someone with that experience, run the business side.
I don't want to generalize. I don't think that's entirely correct, because I think there's some great entrepreneurs who are physicists that have built amazing companies, or scientists. I think it's just really important for everybody to know the role that they play within the organization. And if you decide to take the management track, you can't dictate product and strategy at the same time. You can't be the chief, the cook, and the bottle washer all in one. It just won't work. And the startups that I've been involved in that have failed, a lot of them have failed not because their technology didn't work or the market opportunity didn't exist, but the human dynamics in the company didn't work. And poor decisions were made. And as a result of that, the failures are never attributed to one thing. They're generally a series of cascading events that cause failures, just like in real life. There's a series of events together. And I think it's really important, again, if you have multiple founders, the probability of failure goes down substantially than if you're a sole founder.
Thank you very much, Mo. I love this discussion, really, but we have to move on to the next question, which is for Estelle. What are the biggest challenges, quantum startup, let's say, founder faces on both sides, hardware side, software side? What were your experiences in that domain, Estelle?
Okay, I have 4 bullet points here. The first one is you need to identify your skill. Are you more on the hardware or the software part of quantum computing? If it's hardware, do you have knowledge to build a full stack quantum computing company from scratch, or do you just want to build pieces from it? Right? If it's software, do you have knowledge of quantum algorithms? Is this quantum inspired? So you really need to understand, your strength, right? What is your edge? And now, once you've understood your edge, based on what you want to build, you need to find co-founders, right? And so you need, people said already, find a co-founder or a couple of co-founders to complement your skills. Where do you find one? Maybe incubators. I found mine at CDL, accelerators, or introductions, for example. And right from the start, you people need to be open. Both of you need to share the vision that you have about the company, your aspirations, your motivations, your fears, your working style, your finances. Probably you'll be bootstrapping, right? So people say it's it's a very important relationship, like marriage, for example. So you probably have a common destiny for 5 to 10 years. So this you need to nail it very well. After that, you need to identify the problem. So which problems can you solve with your quantum skill? For example, I take the example of Christian from Xanadu. He had a PhD in quantum photonics, and he went on to build a full stack photonic quantum computing company. And then along the line, he moved also on the software part, but he started with his strong edge. So that's the advice I would give, start with whatever edge is strong. And you need to ask yourself the question, does your solution to the problem you want to solve has a relevant business value? Maybe it can be very beautiful physics or science problem that you're solving, but is it a painkiller? Is it a vitamin supplement? So you really need to answer those questions. And also, is it solvable? I mean, if you go on to solve your RSA with Shaw algorithm, nobody's going to invest in you. People understand what is going on, right? So you need to ask yourself your question: is it solvable, and in what time frame? Right. So these are kind of the things that you need to answer. So identifying the problem. The third one is understand the market. So what is the market size of the problem you're trying to solve? For example, for us or for over-the-counter derivative, we know that it's around the tens of trillions of dollars, right? So you need to understand that. And who are the people who are currently solving that problem? What are the techniques that they are using? And what advantage will your solution bring in dollar value? So this is very important for you to understand. Understand the strategy of your players. Are you planning to collaborate with your potential competitors? Are you trying to collaborate with them or compete with them? So this is something like your go-to-market strategy. Maybe you need to have an understanding of that right away. The fourth thing is understanding the funding landscape. So I mean, for sure, probably you're going to be bootstrapping, but at some point you cannot develop your product. You need to raise funds. So you need to understand how do you raise funds from a startup, is it incubators, angel investors, VCs? What does it take for you to be, people used to say VC backable company? You need a prototype, an MVP, and people want to see traction. You need to have like LOIs and stuff like that. So like just to summarize, you need to identify your skills, identify the problem, understand the market, and understand the funding landscape. I'm sure a lot of people can chip in to bring in more things there.
I'm sure they can, but unfortunately, we don't have much time left. Maybe a quick comment or idea to share in addition to what Estelle told us. I don't know if, you know, in your experience, perhaps Elham or
Okay, I guess like just to add something that Estelle said, you know, in quantum particularly, something that is unique, not compared to the other startup, is that we need to also have very clear benchmark, because, you know, we cannot just sell that, you know, come and get the quantum algorithm, quantum crypto solution, quantum hardware, unless we have the very clear, honest benchmark. And that's a little bit of like understanding a market, like understanding what the client wants. What is the actual benchmark that your client wants to, not just to go with the hype, we're clearly saying that what is the advantage and added value of your product. And that's the tough question. That's the tough question, to exactly being able to say what you're bringing to the table.
Exactly. And yeah, a great, you know, startup founder should be able to make that very clear. Thank you very much, Elham, for that. And let's move on to the next question, which is for Jackson from BDC. What are the greatest opportunities and challenges in commercializing quantum innovations, Jackson?
Thanks, Reza. Sorry, my screen just froze on me. But I'll just maybe focus on a couple of the technology areas that we're excited about as opportunities, and then go over some of the challenges. So, you know, the next 3 years in the quantum computing space, I think, is going to be very exciting. I think there's a kind of a global race right now towards the development of the logical qubit platform, you know, and I think that's one of the next big challenges that are out there. And you know, some of those great opportunities, promising opportunities, actually reside in Canada. And you know, those that will be able to achieve that status and have a clear path to scalability from there, I think will be in a very good position. And what we're seeing in the market is, you know, sophisticated and thought-informed organizations like BMW, Volkswagen, Amazon, Scotiabank. You know, they're closely connecting to these leading platforms right now, developing internal capabilities themselves, and really positioning themselves to be prepared and ready for that disruptive market opportunity. So that's one thing that we're obviously very excited about, and Canada's got a couple horses in the race there. So that's really exciting. On the software side of things, I think we're looking at, you know, how does the quantum software align with the evolution of hardware, right? And so maybe software opportunities that will be unlocked with lower levels of logic, lower number of logical qubits, such as like molecular design for catalysts, could be interesting, just from a technology risk and time to market perspective. On the quantum communication side, we're following the post-quantum crypto solutions through NIST and tracking those solutions there and seeing opportunities for, with that forklift potential opportunity for new management and more robust crypto solutions around that platform. Maybe some of the challenges that we're seeing right now, I think Mo touched on one of them, is that you're starting to see, the turbulence in the public markets starting to come into the private markets. And so, I think it's a good time to start thinking about your growth plans and your contingency plans over the next 12 to 18 months, just so that you're prepared, because there are some potential turbulence coming down the pipe. Some other challenges that we kind of focus on from a deep tech perspective would be the non-dilutive space. So the Canadian non-dilutive funding space is quite fragmented, and so so some of those opportunities is like, how do you think about using non-dilutive funding to really help grow your R&D roadmap and get path to market, right? And so I think there's a bunch of different vehicles, Mitacs being a great opportunity as far as funding interns in the research side, but how do you think about funding that so you're actually developing the IP, developing the product commercialization plan to get your product and technology to market? So being a bit more deliberate around that, I think within the non-dilutive space could be an opportunity, both a challenge and then if it's fixed, an opportunity. And then in the IP space, I think there's varying IP policies across the university spectrum in Canada. There's some thought leadership, for example, in Waterloo and SFU, as far as founder-funded, creator-owned IP. And the idea, a big thing that we look for is how do you get aligned interest from a university to the deep tech startup, right? And so some of these more innovative opportunities are taking, smaller stake at the seed, early stage levels, right? And so really it aligns the interest, because from a deep tech perspective, we look for those strong connections to leading research institutes, strong connections to really significant thought leaders in their space, both as a way to drive future IP, but also to drive the talent pool that's going to be needed to really grow their opportunities. So these are some of the challenges that we see, but I think there's also opportunities in them. And if we can start, looking at them maybe a little bit differently, there's some real opportunity for Canada to really take a global leadership position here.
Thank you very much, Jackson. I think we need to move on to the next question, as we are coming kind of toward the end of the time we have. Thank you. Next question is for Chloé, and it's about innovation zones, right? And tech transfer offices, incubators. We want to know more about their role from your perspective in building a thriving quantum ecosystem across Canada. What can they do for this ecosystem?
Thanks for the question, Reza. It's actually interesting because I'm currently reading a book by Brad Feld. He's a known venture capitalist, entrepreneur, mentor, everything you want in the US. And the book is about building startup ecosystems. And I tend to share his view on that all the groups you've mentioned, so VCs, incubators, innovation zones, organizations like that, are essentially support organizations. So, and their business model is to offer services to startups and companies. So in building an ecosystem, these might not actually be the best people to lead this growing, this ecosystem, this community. They're there to support. Leaders of a community, I think, should be those who benefit most from the community, which is the innovators, the entrepreneurs, for example. And it doesn't mean that all these groups you've mentioned should not play a role in the ecosystem, not at all. They should definitely be part of it. But their role, in my sense, is to support the ecosystem. So that means, for example, making space available for people in the ecosystems to meet and discuss, creating opportunities for that to happen. So this is a good example of exactly what Mitacs is doing right now, having this opportunity for all of us to meet and people to ask questions. So these are the kind of things I think these organizations can do.
Wonderful.
The question.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much for that answer, Chloe. And yeah, very important role indeed they can play. Next question is for Mo. What are the best instruments of funding for science startups? Where to look for resources? You know, if I'm a postdoc or PhD student and decided to start my own startup, when should I actually start thinking about venture capital raising? Mo?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to understand when, depending on the time that you're trying to start a company and raise money, how you would approach it. Look, the majority of the people that are running venture funds today, and the majority of the entrepreneurs that are operating them, have actually never seen a tech downturn. So the entire thing is based on the recency bias of availability of huge amounts of capital, and people kind of wear it as a badge of honor how much capital they've been able to raise. Well, that's great that you raised a lot of capital, but that means you own a lot less of your company. So I think the idea of, so I think the first and foremost area that, and then there's another element in deep tech. And anybody who's ever done scientific research will know that innovation is unpredictable. You cannot say that I'm going to solve this problem by this time next year. You may solve it, you may not. If innovation was predictable, the world would be a completely different place. So innovation tends to be nonlinear. And in other words, you try for a long period of time and nothing happens, and then something happens, and then innovation happens. So how do you fund that, given that innovation is nonlinear and non-predictable? So I think the first and foremost is to be capital efficient and ensure that the use of capital that you have is going towards the right way to create business value. Because there could be business value created from innovation, or it could be business value created somewhere else. So then once you know what the capital requirements are, then you can start going through the list of what are the sources of capital. And I would go and tap, in Canada, we have a disproportionate advantage for starting deep tech companies compared to many other places in the world because of the generous government subsidies that exist, both for programs like Mitacs, as well as programs like SHRED or other programs from NRC. This doesn't exist everywhere in the world. So $1 invested in deep tech in Canada is something like equivalent to $2 invested in deep tech in the United States, if not more. So I think tapping those sources of non-dilutive funding and being capital efficient should be the first order of business. And then surrounding yourselves with the venture investors who have the time, scale, and the appetite necessary to see things through. And some businesses are if you're trying to build a quantum computer, you need 200 million bucks, okay? So having a group of investors that can have deep enough pocket and they have the long enough time horizon to be able to bring additional capital to the table is really important. If you're starting a quantum computing startup and you have your doctor neighbor investing in it that's got 5% of his or her investment in that's not going to provide the $200 million. That individual may be incredibly wealthy, but the portion of their net worth that they allocate to risky ventures in deep tech is going to be small, versus there are funds whose sole mandate is to invest in deep tech. And I think surrounding yourself with those investors is really critical. So to really sum it up, I think number one, understanding the capital you need and how to use that capital efficiently. Secondly, tapping all the sources of non-dilutive funding that are available to the entrepreneur. And third, invest and going after those investors who have the appetite, the risk profile, and the time horizon. That's really important, the time horizon to invest in deep tech. And you guys should familiarize yourself with how the sausage is made inside the sausage factory when it comes to venture investing. The way the venture business works is there's a fund. That fund gets raised. That fund has a certain time period, generally 10 years. For the first 5 years of that fund, investors invest in the company. For the subsequent 5 years of the fund, investors do follow-up, or intend to liquidate. Some funds have a much longer time horizon than 10 years. Some are evergreen funds. Some are strategic investors that don't have a time horizon. So if you're investing in a 6th year of a fund that has a 10-year lifetime, and your business is going to be 10 years from profitability or 10 years from an exit, that's a mismatch. That's an impedance mismatch. That's not a good investor.
Great. Thank you very much, Mo, for that insightful answer. Thank you. I love to discuss it more, but unfortunately we don't have time now, but perhaps next webinars we will talk more about that. And our next question is for Jake, and the question is, what are the most critical questions that founders should ask before considering incubators and accelerators? Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Reza. Yeah, I think some of the main questions is, if you're building this company, you have to ask yourself, are you building it in a way that is designed to be massively scalable? If you are to increase the amount of customers or the scale of the product or what it's serving, is this going to kind of grow with it, or does that have to be rethought? Another kind of question comes in the fact of, does it have this kind of near-term horizon that can be executed on? Maybe it's a very, very long-term type of business, and that's okay. Some of these moonshot technologies are very key. But it's also, is there something in the near term that can lead there, that can, help the business grow, maybe bringing some money, bringing some more teammates to work on it, etc. Those are the types of things that I think you should ask yourself as well before going through these programs. And then, can you make a significant enough progress over the course of the program for that? Usually they last about a year or similar. If you can't make progress that year, maybe it's better to come at another year when you can kind of dedicate more time to it, and it's kind of at a stage where you can kind of navigate in such a way that the advice can make more motion. Another big kind of pillar here is there's a number of challenges and risks around the kind of building out the right team, building a defensible product, and also kind of having kind of credible market traction. So these kind of pillars are ultimately things that you'll probably have to be on the path to de-risking, or kind of have an idea of what you need to de-risk them. But those are kind of, when you're in that type of position, also a great time to kind of come through. And what should you expect to receive? Really, you're receiving guidance and an opportunity to meet very, various potential investors, maybe even teammates that might join as co-founders, maybe potential partners or customers. And in general, a lot of incubators are very different that way, where they're looking for the preformed company. But with CDL, particularly with Quantum, we're really looking for even those at the stage that they're just coming out of research. They're really looking to explore what building a company might look like, and really are looking to sandbox that idea with various other potential co-founders. And really, that's what we specialize in with the quantum space, so that many of these companies are kind of at a stage where they're kind of ready to kind of go off as companies through the mentorship phase of this program, or even many others that they may get exposed to.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jake. Absolutely agreed so much that, those incubators, especially somewhere like CDL, which is their expert in quantum side, can do. I'm going to take the next few minutes to answer a few questions that we have from our great audiences today. And the very last 5 minutes, John will have the closing remarks for us. Now, this question is from Connor, and Connor wants to know, John mentioned, I believe he means John Davis, you mentioned finding the first million when it comes to creating first prototype. I wonder what advice the panel has for where that seed funding can be found. So yeah, the question is about seed funding, where to look for the very first, check.
So let me just start with one. It depends on the size of the business. And so I think Jackson, Mo, and Jake have now all really pointed out in a way that these accelerators and VC funds are really designed to attract and build up these massively scalable companies, these unicorns that are going to make billions of dollars. And they really, if you're going to do that, if you're going to build the fault-tolerant quantum computer, you can go to these guys, and they will give you money. But if you, but I think very few people are going to build that unicorn. And I think there's no shame in building just a great business that's profitable and provides jobs, and that can be a really great part of the quantum ecosystem in Canada. Like Khaled mentioned, this hardware equipment manufacturers, or there's a lot of ways that we can have great other businesses in Canada that aren't these unicorns. VC funding won't give you money for that, to be perfectly honest, right? You're going to have to go to friends and family. You're going to have to, be independently wealthy. You're going to have that neighbor who's a doctor, like Mo said. That's where you're going to get that money, or the government, right? And hopefully, I have been long advocating that the best thing that the government can do to support innovation is to buy the hardware companies' prototypes, be the first customer, right? Canada has this great program. It used to be called BCIP, and now it's called the ISC Challenges, and they really are doing that. They're working on the government buying a product and putting it in somebody else's facility. And I think that is one of the best things that Canada is doing in quantum now. That's my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Estelle, what was your experience with receiving the first check?
We don't have any check now. We are bootstrapping.
You're bootstrapping still. Okay.
I mean, there's a reality maybe people are missing here, is that there's a chicken and egg problem. To have a prototype, you need to have people working to get it. To have people working, you need to have money. To have money, you need to have traction. To have traction, you need to have like LOIs. I think having a neighbors who are like medical doctors is good. You probably start with either with your own money or with some angel investors. Once you have a prototype, I feel like it's easier for you to have maybe paid partnerships or paid pilots. That will help. That will be attractive to VCs to have this first really 1 million seed investment. That's my feeling.
One thing I would highlight was maybe a role for industry associations. If you look at some of the industry associations like QEDC in the States, they do road mapping. And so they really do an overview of where the technology is going and try to map that to some of the challenges. One thing that we're working with government partners on right now is the ability to start quantifying, I call them deep tech challenges for like pre-seed and seed type companies. So trying to quantify hard problems that, hey, if you can solve this problem, that's a great first step to starting a company. Right. And so maybe that's like a $200,000 to $300,000 check, right? And then and then you go up the value chain to the program that John talked about as far as ISC. You've proved this challenge, this technology problem. Now maybe you've proven yourself, you have higher credibility, and now you're starting to build your early first gen product, right? And you find someone that's a beachhead within the government, that's an operator that understands your space, that can give you the feedback in that space and really engage with them. And hopefully, if you get them excited, they could be your first client, right? And that could be up to $1 million, right? And so just by bootstrapping these things and hustling and driving this, there's ways to just show traction and to show technology evolution here, right? And so these are opportunities that I think that we help quite a few people with, even companies that we're not investing in. We have lots of conversations just to try to help spur the ecosystem. That's another part of what we try to do.
Fantastic. And thank you so much, Peter, for adding that link in the chat box. Very, very thoughtful. Thank you. I don't know, Elham, what was your experience with raising the first check, and how was that?
You want to know my secret? The point is, we are a software company. So we fall on the domain that John was saying, that we didn't need to have 100 million right away. And France is also, perhaps like Canada, is one of the most fantastic places to start a company, because you can get a lot of non-diluting opportunity. There is the BPI, there is the DGA, there is all sorts of this thing. We put also, as Estelle was saying, sort of bootstrapping, trying to put our own money and going to friends and family, and now start going to do the hard job of getting the seed fund. So I guess the job of software to some extent is easier when it comes to the fundraising, because you don't need the huge one, and also you get a lot of tax subsidy when you're hiring people to get it part. But then you pay the pain, because now you kind of have the market complexity that you need people to build those devices for you so that you can do part of it. So no pain no gain. Somewhere you will pay for it. But I agree that it's also important to understand which domain you're targeting and what is the most appropriate model of funding. There is no one fits all for companies.
Great. Thank you very much. We don't have much time. Basically, perhaps in less than 1 minute, maybe Chloe can answer this question. I'm a PhD student in computer science. Where do I start with building my startup?
I would say most universities have entrepreneurship programs or kind of inside the internal incubators, accelerators. They all have different names. So that's one thing that you can start. Or sometimes it's not a program. Sometimes it's people who can connect you with incubators outside the university. Another great thing is just to show up to meetups. And that's where you'll meet all the people in the ecosystem, including the incubators, the mentors, all the people who can either help you directly or connect you with the people who can do it. So just don't be afraid to go out there and talk to people.
Great advice. I absolutely agree. And, there's many places online, also resources, and, universities do have all kinds of resources that they can help you. Thank you very much, guys. We have a few minutes. On behalf of our team at Mitacs, I would really like to thank you all. This was a great event. We learned so much. I learned so much. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Lots of great, insightful, helpful comments and stories we heard today. And now with that, I ask John to kindly do the closing remarks. John from Mitacs.
Thank you so much. I feel like I've been at a class reunion of some sort. I mean, through secondhand connections, lots of names came up that are former colleagues of mine. I really appreciate, connecting with the quantum community one more time. It reminds me of my old days as a quantum scientist. This has been a very interesting discussion. Clearly not enough time, Reza, so we're just going to have to work on having more of these webinars. Elham, don't be surprised when Mathilde Briou gets in touch. Don't put her into the spam folder. She's one of us, and she'll be talking with you about possibilities for next week. I appreciate when the hardcore financial guys gives a shout out to Mitacs as an efficient use of capital. And it is an efficient use of capital for startup companies. We do, by the way, we support companies all the way to initial startups. We have an entrepreneurship program, the Entrepreneur Accelerate program, where we deal with conflict of interest issues and things like that. And so we can actually provide, Estelle, for you, we can provide support through Mitacs internships, even when the founders are kind of involved in the actual project. We work it out. So, and we provide international programs as well, including through our core Accelerate program. We can provide support in bilateral movement of students. I think it's clear, and this has been said, that we're not there yet. We're on the verge of creating benefit. I think John's comment about there's more to life than building a generalized quantum gate computer, that may be for the big boys to play in. I know the Quebec strategy is explicitly, and this was talked about by, we had a meeting with Pierre Fitzgibbons when we were in Quebec City. The Quebec strategy is explicitly to embed themselves into the supply chain, so don't try and compete with IBM on building a quantum gate computer. But there's loads of other stuff, and John's company is an example. There's loads of other stuff that can be done that will build a lot of benefit and exploit a lot of knowledge and technology. Once again, I'm offering up Reza and his colleagues as being more than willing to help. They're all very hardworking. Don't worry about sending Reza an email at 1 a.m. He may even answer you. But we have a team ready to help out companies, and we're as anxious as all of you on the call are to make something happen globally, but preferably in Canada, given that we get such generous Canadian government support. So with that, thank you all. This has been a great session, and hopefully there will be more sessions. For those of you still on the line, and we had well over 100 participants, I notice, plenty of opportunity outside of academia. I'm saying this as somebody who's left academia. But yes, most PhDs even in the almighty physics, and Elham, I appreciate your comment about physics not being completely central to all things great and wonderful. But most people who get PhDs in physics, in even computer science, will not get a job in academia. They'll get a job in industry. And that's been proven by countless surveys, even of major and important global universities. Academia is wonderful, but so is non-academia. So with that, back to you, Reza. I think we just say goodbye to everybody. It's been great.
Absolutely.
Reza, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Yes, we say goodbye, and we hope to see you in our next events. There will be more of these quantum webinars coming from Mitacs. Please stay tuned and join us next time. Until then, stay safe, and thank you so much. Have a great day, night, afternoon.